Good morning students and welcome to today's class on structure of heart. Now heart, it is a hollow and conical organ which is situated in the middle of thoracic cavity, which is slightly located towards the left side. So it is located in the middle of thoracic cavity, which is called as mediastinum, and in that mediastinum cavity this heart is located. It is made up of cardiac muscle. So heart is a muscular organ which is made up of cardiac muscle. It has a narrow apex which is directed downward and a broad base which is directed upward. So always when we draw or when we see the diagram of heart, the apex is downward, narrow part is downward and broad base is upward. So it is protected by a rib cage, that means it is present in thoracic cage. So on the lateral side it is protected by rib cage and vertebral column. The average length of heart is 12 centimeters and the width is approximately 9 centimeters. So approximate weight in male humans is about 300 grams and in females it measures about 250 grams. Now let us see which parts are associated or what structure does the heart exhibits. So first one, pericardium. Heart is protected inside a double layered transparent thin sac like structure called pericardium. The pericardium encloses a space between its two layers. That means you can say pericardium is made up of two layers. Outer one is parietal pericardium and inner one is visceral pericardium. Between these two pericardium there is a space which is called as pericardial space. This pericardial space is filled with pericardial fluid, and the pericardium and the pericardial fluid, it protects the heart from external shock, or you can say physical shock or injuries. Then next part in the structure of heart, that is chambers. So heart, human heart is four chambered, out of which two are auricles which are left and right auricle, and two are ventricles which are right and left ventricles. So two auricles and two ventricles are there in human heart. Now first let us see about the auricles. So auricles are upper thin walled receiving chambers of the heart. These are located on upper side of the heart, that means towards the base. These are thin walled and receiving chambers. Why receiving? Because they receive the blood from various parts of the body. So blood coming from various parts of the body through various veins, that is poured firstly into auricles. So hence they are called as receiving chamber of the heart. There are two auricles, namely right auricle and left auricle. Both the auricles are separated by inter-auricular septum. So in between these two auricles there is an inter-auricular septum. Right auricle has opening of precaval vein, postcaval vein and coronary sinus. So right auricle, it has opening of precaval vein, postcaval vein and coronary sinus. All these are the veins which collect deoxygenated blood from various parts of the body. Hence the right auricle receives deoxygenated blood. The opening of precaval vein in right auricle is guarded by Hervesian valve. Similarly, the opening of postcaval vein is guarded by Eustachian valve and the opening of coronary sinus is guarded by Tibaceous valve in most of the animals. The left auricle has opening of pulmonary vein. Hence, the left auricle receives oxygenated blood coming from the lungs after oxygenation. So, hence it receives oxygenated blood. The right auricle opens into right ventricle by right auriculoventricular aperture, which is guarded by tricuspid valve. Similarly, the left auricle, it opens into left ventricle by left auriculoventricular aperture, which is guarded by bicuspid valve. In the diagram you can see there is a labeling of tricuspid valve. Here is a labeling of tricuspid valve and here is a labeling of bicuspid valve, and this is the left auriculoventricular aperture, this one is the right auriculoventricular aperture. Now about the ventricles. Now ventricles are lower thick walled distributing chambers of the heart. These are located on lower side. They are thick walled. Comparatively the wall of ventricle is comparatively thick than the wall of auricles, and their function is to distribute blood to various parts of the body. So hence they are distributing chambers of the heart. There are two ventricles. Like auricles, there are also two ventricles, right ventricle and left ventricle. And here also right and left ventricle are separated by interventricular septum. But this interventricular septum is slightly inclined toward right ventricle. Hence, somewhat right ventricle is somewhat smaller than left ventricle. Internally, the wall of ventricle is thrown into many folds called papillary muscle or columni carni. In the figure, you can see there is labeling of papillary muscle here. See here, this is a papillary muscle. Below the left ventricle labeling, here is a labeling of papillary muscle. So these papillary muscles are the foldings or fold of one ventricular valve, which are also called as columni carni. These papillary muscles are attached to tricuspid and bicuspid valves of AV aperture by very fine thin thread like structures called chordae tendineae. Right ventricle gives out pulmonary aorta while the left ventricle gives out systemic aorta. So in the figure you can see in blue color the large vessels are shown arising from right and left ventricle. So from right ventricle arises pulmonary aorta and from the left ventricle arises systemic aorta. So pulmonary aorta, which arise from right ventricle, it is present externally from ventral side of the heart. It arises from right ventricle, and the part of right ventricle from which or from where this pulmonary aorta arises, that part is called conus arteriosus. So the region from where there is a starting point of pulmonary aorta, so that region is called conus arteriosus. This opening is guarded by three semilunar valves. So opening of this pulmonary aorta from right ventricle is guarded by a set of three semilunar valves. This pulmonary aorta, it runs forward and divide into two branches, right and left pulmonary arteries. These pulmonary artery carry deoxygenated blood to the lungs where this blood gets purified or oxygenated. Then second part, systemic aorta. Now systemic aorta, it is also present on ventral side. It arises from left ventricle, and the part of left ventricle from where the systemic aorta arises, that is called as aortic vestibule. So remember, the part of right ventricle from which pulmonary aorta arises is called conus arteriosus, and the part of left ventricle from which systemic aorta arises, it is called as aortic vestibule. This opening is guarded by semilunar valve as usual, and this systemic aorta supplies oxygenated blood to different parts of the body. Then precaval vein, it is present on dorsal side and it collect deoxygenated blood from upper part of the body, that is from the head and neck, and carry the blood, deoxygenated blood, into right auricle. Then post-caval vein, the pre-caval vein also called as superior vena cava, likewise the post-caval vein also called as inferior vena cava. This is also present on dorsal side, as the pre-caval vein collect the blood, deoxygenated blood from upper part of the body. Likewise, the post-caval vein, name itself indicate post-caval vein, so it collect the deoxygenated blood and carry this deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body up to the right auricle. So which lower part? From abdomen, from hands and from legs, all such part it carry or it collect the blood and carry this blood up to right auricle. The next vein is pulmonary vein. Now these pulmonary vein, they are also present on dorsal side, but they carry oxygenated blood. So remember, these are the only veins which carry oxygenated blood from lungs up to the left auricle. Then coronary artery. As we can see that in every part or in every organ of our body, the oxygenated blood is supplied by arteries, and generally deoxygenated blood is collected by veins. So supply to the organ is by artery, and collection of blood from organ is through veins. So working of heart is also continuous from our birth up to our death, till death. The heart works continuously and restlessly. So for working of the heart, this cardiac muscle, they also need oxygen and glucose. So all the nutrients. So supply of these nutrients and oxygen and glucose to the heart muscle is conducted through a particular system called coronary system, and for that purpose the blood vessels which carry this blood up to the wall of heart, these are called coronary artery, and the blood collected from heart wall is through coronary veins. So coronary artery, this is a pair of coronary artery which carry oxygenated blood to the heart muscles. Likewise, the coronary vein, in addition to major veins, a pair of coronary vein bring deoxygenated blood from the wall of heart. These also open into right auricle. So this is all about the structure of heart.